something that, we labor with in the 12th house that has a creative destiny that seeks to be consciously expressed. Anyway, so that's a very hard thing to discuss or describe because it's happening in a place that's not easily seen. And so watch for dreams, start to watch subtle patterns, start to watch what things or people are entering your life and provoking you to look at things differently. That's the 12th house. The card I drew is the Knight of Swords, which is perfect for Pluto in Aquarius in the 12th. It's an air suit. And the Knight of Swords can represent a person or an energy that's like charged up, that's going to stir the pot, mentally, especially, and intellectually. So you also think about what ideas are like stirring the pot for you and forcing you to consider either things about yourself or life that maybe you haven't considered before. Or that figure could be the sign of ideas or people or figures or voices within yourself that are becoming more dynamic and loud, but it's an unknown. I'm just getting to know. This is unconscious material, so it's like very powerful but kind of elusive parts of yourself that will start seeking expression. For Pisceans, where you tend to hang out in the emotional body, being very sensitive and caring and compassionate and empathetic and romantic and imaginative. These energies are more about mind and intellect, communication, the nervous system, and those parts of yourself. There can be a way in which we pit intellectual and emotional against one another, and there's also an opportunity over the coming decades to be fusing intellect and emotion at a deeper level. So anyway, these are my thoughts for all 12 signs. Hope you find this useful as a kind of review on the entrance of Pluto into Aquarius. I hope you are having a great day today. I hope that you enjoyed this, and we will see you again tomorrow for one last episode this week. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.
OBS fix yo shit, brother.
Pluto is heading into the sign of Aquarius yet again after his short stay last year between March the 23rd and June 11th. And it's a really exciting time for humanity as this great force of titanic transformation and evolutionary impulse is happening for us all collectively and individually. We're going to see today how this works for you based on your sun, moon, or rising sign. I suggest you listen to your rising sign. And today I have a very special guest, Adam Ellenbus of Nightlight Astrology. Adam was my teacher in 2018 when I discovered the amazing tools of ancient and traditional Hellenistic astrology. I'm so delighted to bring him into our session today to also complement this with his wisdom, his insights, and also maybe draw a tarot card for each sign as well. So stay tuned for that. We're going to get started. I'm just about to let Adam into our Zoom room. Welcome, Adam. So glad to have you today. I already told people that you were my teacher in 2018 when I discovered the incredible tools of traditional astrology for the first time. And
Adam Ellenbus, this guy's so
right now at this time
such
of
a
year,
fucking
deadhead towards 24. I understand you're doing your annual Kickstarter program. Tell
It's
us
not
more.
what you would picture
Thanks, Laura.
the
I'm
archetypal
so happy to be hanging out with you,
body
and,
type of an
my
astrologer.
memories of you in our classroom space are, you were one of the students who always had the most poignant questions, and yeah, I'm just so happy to see your work just exploding and doing so well, and yeah, it's just really fun to collaborate with you and be here today. So at the end of every year for about 10 years right now, I fundraise to support the content that I create year round, and the fundraiser serves as a sort of flash sale for all of our certification programs. So we have 4 years worth of professional astrology curriculum in ancient Hellenistic astrology, and one of those is also a horary astrology course. All of the courses that we provide, about 60% of the students who come through our programs are on a form of need-based tuition, which means that they're paying what they can within their budget. And part of the vision of the school since its inception in 2010 has been to make sure that
talk Pluto in Aquarius. Okay, as an Aquarius rising, it's my favorite topic. So I mentioned earlier we had a little testing 1-2 last year in the month of March through to mid-June when Pluto did his 0-degree ingress and really just basically gave us a flavor of what is to come. What I noticed and a lot of us did in astrology land is how much the AI thing just bounced into the collective sphere with all that information, news, excitement, chat GPT, trepidation, concern, screenwriters and filmmakers or creatives being worried they're going to be replaced. That was the main thing I was noticing last year, and now we're going to have him back on the 21st of January, where he'll be, or 20th, depends on where you live, I guess, and where he'll be
In a
there
hilarious
all
twist,
the
the
way through to
characters of
September
Family Guy
2nd,
accidentally switch
and then he slides
personalities.
back into
Chaos ensues
Capricorn
as
around the
serious loss
19th. He
becomes
comes
the
back into
prankster, clueless
Aquarius.
Peter turns into a genius, and Stewie becomes the caring baby. The episode is filled with unexpected laughs and surprising character development.
But we only see 2-degree movement this year as well to keep people abreast of that idea. It's still really an early stage of a major energy. Yeah. So some of your thoughts about some of the broader themes for the collective before we give everybody's all sign delineation.
Well, I just did a series on my YouTube channel, and like you've been doing, kind of previewing, priming the pump, getting us ready for this archetypal experience, which we had just such a brief preview of last year, but it was a powerful one, obviously. One of the things that I said in this recent series that we did was that it helps to understand the ancient significations of Saturn. And most of the time when people are studying, first studying, say, modern astrology, you'll hear something like Saturn is structure, or, sort of like you get these very
swear to God,
narrow, unfortunately,
I've
narrow
never laughed as hard as I laugh
Saturn.
before I
Once
started
we
streaming, and
really
thanks to
broaden
you,
and understand,
all of you.
the mystical depth of Saturn that ancient astrologers had, then I think we start moving into some interesting spaces with the meaning of Pluto entering Saturn's fixed air sign. So the first thing that comes to my mind would be that Saturn, in ancient astrology, Saturn is the dimmest and most distant planet. That's like a starting point. And that as such, it sat on the threshold and was thought of as a kind of gatekeeper between the limited and the limitless, the known and the unknown, the visible and the invisible. Saturn also, as a boundary straddler, was the planet associated with the aspect of the opposition. Not because Saturn is oppositional per se, but because Saturn is a planet that always demarcates the boundary between two things that sit on opposite sides of a third thing. So you have like a wall, what's inside the wall versus what's outside the wall. Saturn will therefore represent, for example, people that will fight at all costs to keep everything normal as it always has been inside the wall. Whereas Saturn will also be the planet that represents people who have been cast out on the other side of the wall by society. For example, Saturn's ancient significations included heretics, as well as inventors and innovators, contemplatives, mystics, but also authoritarians who would do anything and would go to all lengths to make sure that new ideas were called heretical. And so, for example, you have someone like Galileo, who would be considered, in ancient astrological terms, Saturnian. He's a Saturnian figure because he introduces an idea that gets him labeled as a heretic, and yet it's that same idea that ushers us from one paradigm to another. And so Aquarius is really, when you think about Aquarius, what you're really thinking about is the threshold between old ideas and new ideas, or between one paradigm and another. And it kind of, Saturn in Aquarius is sort of like, as the ruler, is sort of demarcating the boundary between thought structures that guide or shape our experience of reality, and which ones we're open to versus which ones we try to keep out, and stuff like that. So once you think about it that way, when Pluto goes into Aquarius, of course, the most exciting thing to think about is how are our thought structures and paradigms about to change, which of course can come through technology, it can come through political change and ideological change and all these different kinds of things. But I think what's also really exciting to think about is not just it's about our relationship with ideas themselves. And like one of the things that I think, for example, if we haven't taken the time to really contemplate and let an idea work through us and digest it, one of the things that can happen is that anything that's labeled new in contrast to old can be embraced, but too quickly. And then we have to deal with the shadows of our kind of like ideological impulsiveness. Like, ooh, this new, and that's why I think you have people sort of scared of AI, right? It's like, ooh, there's this new idea, and I think there's a hesitance in a wise sense of like, let's be careful, let's not go too quickly, let's absorb and think about this before we just, run off. That's already the tension of Pluto and Aquarius. Just because it's new doesn't mean it's good, but also just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad. So, there's this space of like, how do we digest and work with like paradigm altering ideas, and how quickly do we allow them to be used or experimented with? And that's all the space of that threshold space that Saturn in the fixed air sign represents.
Yeah, it reminds me, I was just having the same kind of conversation with Dan Waits of World Astrology Report, because of the Pluto ingress into Aquarius in history coinciding with the discovery of new peoples. Marco Polo and his trips to China, that was one of those eras, the conquistadors and the Incan Empire, and the sort of coming into the place of discovering a consciousness or a sentient intelligent being. These cases are humans, and the water bearer is a symbol of a humanoid body pouring water on humanity. And we're looking at AI, and it is a new form of intelligence. We're all thinking the aliens are going to be here. This is going to be about finding the dead bodies for sure, and locked up in the wherever they are. They could literally be, hey, here comes some alien intelligences that have bodies that are, extraterrestrial. But AI will be an alien intelligence that we are encountering, just like that we didn't know that was really going to be there or could be there. And it could be scary, and it could be exciting. It could be revolutionary in a positive way. I mean, the Protestant Reformation, like talk about a major vibe that happened in Pluto and Aquarius. There's a standard set way that things are done. It's a Catholic tradition. It's the the Roman Empire version of Christianity, and then boom, along comes a Reformation, and it's not just a new religion, it's a new concept, right, about what is happening with the bread and the wine. And it's not like magically transforming. And I kind of find that this whole idea of the intelligence of AI may also allow us to communicate with other terrestrial intelligences, like the whales, like to be decoding languages of other species. So I actually feel excited about it. But before we started today, I brought in a quote from Ren Butler's Archetypal Universe. Everyone knows me on my channel. This book is every time popped out. And I thought that it was interesting that Einstein was born with a Pluto square Jupiter. And when Pluto enters into Aquarius at 0 degrees, he'll square Jupiter in, I think, 5 or 6 degrees up there in Taurus at the time. And that energy is going to be kind of baked into this year, while Pluto's moving through the early degrees of Aquarius. And so here's a really interesting dark side of a Jupiter energetic connected to a Plutonian energetic. And this quote made me really smile, because that's the fear of the AI, amongst other things. A technological process is like an axe in the hands of a pathological criminal. And we talk about, the technology advancements that may happen this time around, because we're also in an elemental air cycle that began near the solstice of 2020, when the Jupiter conjunction with Saturn happened, making this officially an era of air ideas, technology, advancements, things that inform the collective, especially society at large. I kind of feel like this whole energy of the technology is also maybe about the DNA, right? Because we have all this new gene editing technology. And did you hear, Adam, the FDA approved the CRISPR technology to do gene therapy on people, snipping their DNA and permanently changing their DNA to heal illnesses?
I did hear about that. Yeah, that's just so fascinating.
It is hopefully good, but it's also daunting to actually snip the genome.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where it's exactly what I was talking about on my channel recently, where I was like, some of the ideas that come through will be so big that you don't know. Should I be excited? Should I be afraid? And I think
Oh,
one
wow,
of
it's
our
so smooth
allies
now.
during this period is like just even if it's just a little bit of space within which to digest, reflect, let ideas work through, because not only is there a question of whether the idea is good or bad, which is like this, of course, there's this moral level to things, but beyond the moral level of whether something is good or bad is to allow something to be like ideas as living beings, which is a very Aquarian notion, right? That ideas themselves have a kind of ontology, and that if we allow an idea to speak, and we start thinking about and relating to an idea rather than thinking of it as an abstract object.
What's up, Christian? How are you, man?
Like a tool,
Hope you're doing
which
well,
is
dude.
very like empirical. That if we think of ideas like beings or people, which would, by the way, fall in line with the idea that something like AI or technology could start to be seen as sentient. So ideas are in a way sentient. And so if there's any space within which to allow an idea to be sentient and to relate with it, then the idea can reveal more of itself, and it can change or evolve or morph a little bit. And I think relational space with ideas is really important, because one of the big shadows of Aquarius, of course, would be that ideas are the means by which we further alienate and objectify ourselves from material, sensual, like embodied life. We don't want that. I think that's the
Good, man. I'm
the
good.
kind of
Thanks,
big
buddy.
shadow of Pluto in Aquarius. So it's like, if we
Glad
can
you're
have
doing
an
well.
experience of ideas coming through, not just as good or bad, and should we or shouldn't we use them in this or that way as tools, but thinking of ideas as things that we can relate to and letting ideas have life.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I always jokingly call the Aquarius energy Spock in Star Trek, you know, where we put Captain
Cool,
Kirk
man.
and
That's
Leo,
awesome,
you know?
buddy.
And so, and I don't know where we're going to put McCoy, but, you know, you can get this disembodied kind of, you know, robotic quality of human consciousness,
Congratulations,
you know,
man.
forget about the robots we're creating, in which we can really become quite emotionally distant, like, you know, from the heart
Canada
of
always
things, the sun,
welcomes
which is
you.
our soul. Right, so the Saturnian overlay in Aquarius does bring us in touch with the idea that this is the place that is connected to a planet that is in opposition
Oh, wow, insane.
energetically to Leo, where it is the place of the sun.
Do you have
So
any,
to find
like,
ourselves
proof?
losing touch with the soul of something could be a shadow of Aquarius. And you said something on your
Because, I
channel
mean,
really
we
liked
already,
about, you know, your
like,
channel being
Toad
like
and
a
I,
cosmic
we already
church.
kind of
Actually, I wrote it down
planned
because I was
in
listening to it this
January to
morning.
go to
thinking, what are you up
Montreal
to, you know?
to meet up with you.
I know you don't mean like a religious church, you know, but is people singing a
And
song
I understand
that
you had to
something
leave
you all are
early.
in tune with? But yeah, if you want to talk
But,
about church, not in an institution,
I
you
don't
want to
think
talk
I would
about
be able to
Aquarius.
meet up
It's like,
before I have proof.
what is the common thing that threads
And
us
it's not just
together
lies.
that it still has some soul left? Because if there's going to be a soulless nest, it's definitely going to be a Pluto transit through Aquarius. Like, even though the conquistadors discovered the other, they decimated the other, right? So there's a very dark side to that energy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that can happen, I mean, there's this funny saying, probably everyone on your channel has heard before, I know you have, which is like, Aquarians love humanity but hate people.
That's
And,
so
like,
true.
you know, it's like, and that I think if there's anything, I'm the only reason I'm kind of going maybe a little toward the shadows is because one of the things Pluto does is it brings out the shadow of the sign so powerfully, and over time, while also excavating and bringing out the sort of subterranean kind of like richness of the sign. But one of the, I think, shadows of Aquarius would be that we spend so much time thinking about how to advance ourselves. I mean, if you think about the myth of Ganymede, the water pourer, he's sort of beloved by Zeus and thought of as this shining example of humanity, and so he's brought up to serve the gods, which alienates him from humanity. But then also he can't quite be a god. He's in this funny in-between space, and it's a sort of gifted space, but it's a little dissociated, and that's so Saturnian. So anyway, the point being that the shadow is sort of like the very means by which we think we are elevating ourselves is also the very means by which we are condemning exactly who we are and exactly where we're at. And there's just a subtle tension there that we have to work with or learn how to hold. Like, we can actually do two things at once. We can improve ourselves and advance by means of new ideas into something closer to the gods, which is sort of the water pourer myth. But we
Wow,
can
insane.
do so while also completely sort of honoring that
Congratulations if
all
that's
of these
true.
activities don't make us better than nature. They simply are a feature of our nature.
Yeah. Well, there's that Jupiter in, earthy Taurus, squaring the ingress. So, reminding us that the Earth, the Taurus, the reality of being embodied basically will matter. Also, there is the moon is sitting in Gemini and kind of like in a whole sign. Depends on what time you're looking at it, but pretty well trine as well, Pluto. And Gemini being very much about usually scientific discoveries historically, especially Jupiter, especially the conjunction of Jupiter and Mars in Gemini has coincided historically with big turning points in our collective technological world.
We've got that in August. Is that what you're referring
Yeah,
to?
yeah. So a big boost there of some kind of new massive advance in technology. If I had any feelings about this whole thing, I think a lot of it's going to be medical as well as AI, just because Mercury is the night triplicity lord for Aquarius, and he's all about, remember in the ancient tradition of Vettius Valens, he's about physicians, So there's this kind of like overlay of the medical stuff moving way into some
All
kind
right,
of
what's the
frontier or
name
some
and
kind
address of this individual? I'm not
almost,
gonna go
what's,
get
like it's like a sci-fi version
what's the
of our
name of
medical world,
the
which I
person?
would
What's the name of
love.
his company?
And there's this old, that
Do you have
Baba
any proof
Vanga,
that like
the Bulgarian psychic. She predicts in 2024 they're going to have a massive medical breakthrough that cures, if she didn't say cancer, she might have, but cures some major illness. So that's one of her 2024
whatever? I mean,
kind
you're
of
living your life.
predictions.
I'm glad
Everything
you're
else
here in
looks
my
pretty
chat.
bad.
I'm glad you're
And I thought, well, maybe
like,
she's right because she made that prediction
you
without
know,
astrology.
like
She's
you don't
tuning
have to
into
share
like
anything. But I
Baba
mean,
Vanga says major change. I think she said cure for cancer for 24, but some kind of medical breakthrough. So yeah, gene editing maybe it's something like that.
Yeah, I think about what's really interesting to me is I think there's a moon cycle, and I want to say it's in February. There's a February new moon in Aquarius that's exactly square to Uranus and Taurus. And that when I think about, like, I jokingly use the.
do you have
image of,
any
like,
like photos of
you're
you
gonna
in
see all sorts
Montreal
of
or like
interesting
Montreal in
advancements in the
general
med
or
spa
something
industry,
like?
right? Like, here's an anti-aging
proof?
technology or whatever, that kind of. It really, like, the pairing of Uranus, who is very Promethean, right, stealing fire from the gods, and then you pair that with Pluto in
Or you're
Aquarius.
like
and
a ticket
this
of your
new-
like
it
the
just entered Aquarius,
plane
and then the
stub
new
or
moon
something with your
squaring
name
Uranus. I
blocked
just
out
thought,
or
like,
something
that cycle
like.
should be really interesting in February, because that's a moon cycle that's the first one to really emphasize and launch the Pluto and Aquarius
man.
qualities forward in terms of the lunar cycles this year. But then the other one that's really interesting is, I want to say it's around June 6th. There's a new moon in Gemini. And of course, Jupiter will have just entered Gemini, and Venus will be at the heart of the sun.
Oh yes.
It'll be Cazimi at the new moon. And then you've got Jupiter
You're back.
having
Cool.
just entered Gemini, trining Pluto in Aquarius. And I was like, gosh, that's like, I think of Jupiter in Gemini in 2024 as kind of like this
Yo, what's up, Eric? How
like
are you, man?
chaos magic, like
Legend.
just an explosion.
Hey, Christian, man,
of,
like, it's just
hermetic magical
nothing, like,
ideas.
Toad and I, we
and
were
when you
like
think about that,
planning to
trining
meet you in
Pluto
Montreal, and I
Aquarius,
understand you had
that's
to
where I agree
leave.
with you and think that, okay, some
Which
kind
is
of
fine.
advancement in technology, medicine.
But I mean, to say that you're gonna be here
maybe,
again and what we're
some
gonna start
science,
planning
et
again,
cetera,
like that's
could,
200, like 200. It's 200 kilometers for me
could
to
really,
drive from here to
explode
Montreal.
onto the scene. But also one of the features of Jupiter and Gemini that's I think is really interesting is
So I guess I'm
the
upset about it
signs
too.
of Jupiter and Mercury are oppositional to one another.
I
as
just
you
need
know.
some proof,
They,
man.
they put together this.
What's up, Eric? How
notion
are you, man?
of, like the principles by means.
Sorry,
of which
guys,
we
I'm
order
just,
or
like,
organize our
losing
lives,
my
I think, is
mind
very
on this level.
Jupiterian. But in those signs, we have light cohering and moving.
It's no
upward,
LTK, let me
right?
tell you
So
that.
Sagittarius, we're moving in that double-bodied sign. We're moving toward.
Appreciate
the
that
light
you're
half of
here,
the year,
Christian.
or
Appreciate you.
the light
Appreciate you,
rising
Eric.
again. And in Pisces, as the
Thanks, man.
sign,
Absolute legends.
double-bodied sign culminates, the light takes over.
You're the
So you always
LTK
have
legend,
Jupiter
man.
moving toward like this kind of coherence and clarity. With Mercury, the signs are happening.
Just
as the
losing my
darkness
shit,
is
man.
returning, or the darkness is taking over.
I'm
And
just
there's something very
slowly going
deconstructive
crazy
about those periods.
each and every
And
day.
so I also think about, that Jupiter in Gemini is in a sense where
Come on, man.
our ideas about something go through a process of deconstruction.
Can't say it long. Yo, thanks, man.
Part of how deconstruction
Thanks, buddy.
happens is not just saying that's wrong.
Appreciate that.
but
Appreciate
about
you.
introducing
Appreciate
all sorts of new ideas, which then
your comment
those
on
ideas
the
have to
vid.
grapple with
The man.
and be in conversation or dialogue with, and then what may emerge is, should a new idea replace an old one, or should an old idea be slightly changed, modified,
Racking
and
up those
improved?
LTK
But
times, man.
that can be, for some people, that may feel very chaotic, that process, especially if you're uncomfortable with,
It's awesome.
I don't know, like intellectual or spiritual liminal spaces where you have to reconsider your principles or your ideas. But I
I
think,
think I got one more
like,
PB
to
in me for
that's
this
really
level
exciting,
before
especially since it starts in a trine to
I have
Pluto
to
in
really
Aquarius. It's such a
rethink
huge
everything.
year for a transformation of our thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, it really is. And of course, Gemini, the twins are mortal and immortal, right? And there's something about when you
More
tinker
for
with
the
the
natural
DNA,
stuff.
I just want to go back to that, where
I
we're
guess as
tinkering
you-
with playing God
you've
on, the
seen.
human genome. So that whole time, I think, is going to be positive but scary. And I was just talking with Gary Caton for a video that's coming out in January about the
Maybe.
elemental fire year, or in other words, Mercury's doing Cazimi and
Maybe.
retrogrades in all the fire signs in 2024, and it's an interesting placement because,
Hopefully.
with this movement of Jupiter into
Thanks, dude.
a Mercury's
Appreciate that you
Gemini
Have that
kingdom.
faith in me.
Mercury's busy doing a lot of Leo, a lot of Sag, and a lot of Aries, and the Leo-Aries corridor, and the Sag corridor are very active and very intense. But Leo and Aries are in a flow, a sextile to this Plutonian movement through Gemini. So there's something also maybe positive about that. It's just an energy stamp on the year, where it could actually look like Mercury's busy doing good things, looking over at Jupiter in his house and going, "Be good over there. You better behave."
I love that.
You never know. The position of Mercury predominantly in fire is probably going to be about innovation, daring, maybe hopefully not recklessness in ideas and invention.
One of the things that ancient astrologers said about the element of fire that is also sometimes lost on us in modern astrology when we don't study the entire
Yeah,
philosophical
maybe.
paradigm of ancient astrology was that fire was the element that sat closest to the realm of the gods. So if you think about there being like a fire, right, and then air, and then water, and then earth, that was how they organized the elemental spheres. And so fire was thought of as this, we think of it as like, a bonfire or something, but elementally in an earthy sense, that's how we often visualize fire. But for them, fire was also this, like Prometheus stealing the fire from the gods. Fire was also associated with anything that
Man, I gotta
was
really
of
improve
a
that.
higher intelligence that was
Gotta go for the
closer to
headshot, I really do.
nature, like the
It's just a
Ade
waste
or
of
the
time. It's just too
archive
slow
in the
otherwise.
allegory of the cave, the archetypal ideas in the mind of the universe or God or whatever that are coming from a fire that's projecting the images on the wall of the cave that the prisoner is seeing. So they get free and they realize, oh, they're coming from the fire. And then, of course,
man.
eventually the prisoner goes out of
You're
the
a
cave
legend,
and
man.
goes out into the light of the real world. And that's maybe the journey of like enlightenment.
Hey,
But
Christian, if you're
in
here,
this
man,
world, when we get in touch
if
with
you're
fire,
able
it
to
means
show
we get in
any
touch with ideas that
piece
are
of
a
proof, because
higher
dude, we want to
order
meet,
or
like we
that are
want to
being
meet you.
downloaded from some
But if you're
higher
not,
sphere.
like if
So
you're
I
not
think
physically here,
that little
can we
piece
do?
of ancient philosophy is
You know what I mean?
really supports what you're saying.
It's like, what can we
Yeah,
do?
yeah,
What
exactly.
more can
That's
we
it,
do?
and that is the wands and the
That's
tarot
why we're
as
pretty
well.
fucking
So the idea,
frustrated.
if you,
That's why we're
I know you
frustrated,
do
like
the tarot as
frustrated.
well, and we move through the layers of reality.
Because we're
up to
lucky we
that
didn't
fiery
spend any
wands
money
element and
yet.
that same idea that it is closer to the God, eternal, divine aspect of reality or being. That's really and of course
You
that
don't,
makes sense
like,
to me. Like it really
I'm
does.
honored
Just
that
all of that
people,
makes total sense. So
if they're lying,
what are we going to do? We're going to go ahead and do all signs.
feel
I
like
think
they
we
need
kinda
to
covered
lie
it.
to me
Everyone, don't be too afraid about the
or
CRISPR
anyone to
cutting
get
up your
their
genes
approval.
and the robots
That's
taking over the
very-
world. Not next year.
what's
That
the
might be a
word?
little
Char-
later. We can
not
worry
charming.
about that.
Sure. Sure.
It's
Whatever you want
very-
to do, I'm game.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to talk to whales myself. That was an idea. That was an idea that Dan Weiss and I chatted about.
Very
It was
vain,
like, what
but
if
what's the word?
our AI sophistication allows us to translate languages of animals so that
feels
we can
nice
actually
for the
communicate with them?
person.
And what if the whales are really smarter than we
But-
thought, or the porpoises, and any of those smart
Don't do-
mammals in the
don't do that.
water, and they could tell us
Why?
like the history of the Earth?
You
Wouldn't
don't-
that
you
be cool?
don't
Like,
need
the
to
whale says,
lie.
We've been here as there's a kind of spiritual thing about
my
whales
approval
being like
because
memory keepers for the Earth. So
Always
in the new
remember
age community, but it would be kind of cool if like talking to whales led to like a
how important
deconstruction
you are.
of human history and how we all got here.
I would
And that
love
the
if they
rarest
had.
Pepe
I
is
would
you.
love if they were like. I could also like imagine myself being really pleased if they ended up being pretty superficial. Like they had lots of opinions about the Kardashians or.
Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, seriously, yeah, because they've been getting their own like
like
sonar
the Will
version
Smith
of the
episode,
Kardashians. And they're like,
Fresh Prince,
Jesus, Kim, what's with her face?
where he wants to get with like the
Okay,
dentist
well,
or
that
the
would be
dean's
kinda fun,
daughter or
too.
whatever.
So
The
let's,
dean or dentist just goes to him
where's
just
your
like,
Mercury
just be
again?
yourself, and he tries to be this like
Cancer.
Okay, just one
perfect grades but prep boy.
One
Oh,
thing
I've got Mars and
The
Gemini,
daughter
though,
wants like
that's
a
fine.
homeboy.
Okay. One of the things I love about watching your channel a lot, like when I watch your stuff, is you always break yourself up, crack
It's
yourself
hilarious.
up laughing about something that
I
you're
know.
talking about,
I always
which
remember
leads
that.
me to start laughing. So I'm like,
It's just be yourself, man.
it's like really fun. Okay, so we're going to go through the all signs. We're going to talk about some conversations about what
Be
this
as
24
bad
ingress
or
might
as
look
good
like,
as
knowing that it's not
you
done
are
yet, right? We've got a little Capricorn turning
in your
point
heart.
in the fall, but it's still the beginning of a sense of what is in play for the next 2 decades for each of the sun, moon, and rising. I always tell people, listen for your rising. It's all about you. And then, your sun can be your body in Vedic astrology, your home, your mother stuff, your safety needs, your emotions. And then, the sun can be father figures, can be your purpose, career, your eternal nature, your deeper self. So, but I do encourage people always to start with your rising sign, because it will be kind of delineating. I always say the rising sign is
Yeah,
sitting
liars-
at,
liars
at the
get banned
vantage
in this
point in which
channel.
you can peruse the entire
anything
360
in life.
degrees of reality.
Like if they're
your
repeated
others, your
liars and it's
career,
found
your
out that they're
home, your
lying,
children.
they get
So
banned.
best to listen
Just
to rising.
as like there's a what's the word?
Okay, so let me get us over. I'm going to pull up the sky.
Just to like
Unless you want to use your
you
software, I
can
thought I just
admit
flip
your
us into
lies.
You go for it. I don't
In
have
my
mine
chat.
prepared.
Okay, wonderful.
I'm
And,
not talking
are you
about the
gonna pull a
elite
card
or
for people?
leaders. I'm just saying
Oh,
like
sure,
people
sure.
in general that come
Yeah,
to my
wouldn't it be
chat.
kind
Because
of
some people
fun?
come
How
to my
did you
chat
get
and they
into
just
the
fucking
tarot
lie.
again?
I'm not
Oh
saying
gosh,
who.
I mean, I just
I'm not
started getting
saying
into.
it's you, Christian, because I don't know. I have no idea.
Astrology all just came into my life while
But
I was
others,
in the
like,
midst of so
definitely,
many
it's
years of
like-
working with ayahuasca and
I'm honored.
psychedelic, like,
I'm honored that they feel the
entheogens,
necessity
and I
to
just
lie
started,
for me to gain my approval. I
naturally
am.
taking an interest in
I'm
divination, and the
flattered.
one that
It's
taught me the
flattering,
most
that's
was,
the
of course,
word.
astrology, but these were other things that
It's
I did
wrong.
on the side, I guess you could say.
Because it's
Oh,
fake.
What is the name of your book that you're writing? The Oracle Speaks?
Yeah, that's right. That's
You're getting a
that's my
fake
new book. My
reaction from
first
the
book was
person,
a
from
book
me.
about ayahuasca that was published through Penguin in 2010, and I hadn't written a book since then. And Uranus squared my natal Venus, which is my ascendant ruler, and
But
I
I'm honored.
suddenly got caught in
Flattered.
a creative
and honored.
whirlwind and started
And
writing
humbled.
a book, which I just didn't know if I was ever going
It's
to write
wrong.
one again, to be honest. So it's been really exciting to be. The new book is basically. It's everything that I have learned about divination, 14 years of doing this professionally, but it's all deliberately encrypted in story form.
Ah, wonderful. So this is a done book, or it's an on the way book?
It's on the way, and what I've done is I'm pre-releasing it. You can pick it up through the Kickstarter, and I'm releasing one chapter at a time in text and audio form before I put it into like a physical book.
Oh, I can't wait. That sounds amazing. I'll definitely be snapping that book up. Yeah, writing a book, sometimes you have no
Wow,
choice.
that
It's
was
like Elizabeth
terrible.
Gilbert says, when the muse speaks to you, if you don't say yes, the muse will go somewhere else.
That's right. That's exactly right. I was like, okay, I've got to make room for this because it's coming. And that's how it was with my first book, too. It was just like, this is something, and I imagine it's probably the same for all kinds of creatives,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I have been struck by the muse multiple times and forced to write.
Right.
So, that's what I love about YouTube. It's like I don't have
Oh,
to
man.
write. Like as a writer, I hate writing. So,
Right.
okay, it's true. All writers hate writing. All right, so let's roll with Aries and start with that. And I am an Aries sun and moon, so I kind of relate to all of you Aries sun, moon, and rising folk. And for me, like looking at that Pluto ingress into the 11th house of good spirit, it can definitely look like a time of really transforming and revolutionizing and shifting some of your larger groups of belonging, the clubs you wish to
I don't know, man.
connect
I don't
with,
want to speak like for
chosen
Toad,
tribe, maybe some of your
but
friends
he was
as well,
kind of
literally may,
frustrated.
be gone. You may no longer
Anyways,
wish to.
I'm
Literally, the
literally
death
speaking
of
for
those
Toad.
friendships doesn't mean they have to die.
Anyways.
But anyway, there's an energy up there really wanting over the next couple of decades to
About-
transform that part of reality.
Anyways,
But it also
not
kind of
trying to-
is a
I'm
part
really
of the
just
sky that I've
not
seen really
saying
work in people's charts as where they come into a contact with the authentic movement maker in them, like how they wish to do something better for the influence of the group or the others, the big others in their lives. So some of you may really
So
power up
laggy
and you
in left
kind of
strafe, man.
desire to join in with or become a part of or start even your own transformational deeper
Too fucking laggy, bro.
movement of something that you care about, especially because Pluto is definitely that revolutionary impulse as well. I will just mention that you may have to square off with Jupiter in your earnings house, something more deeply aligned with your future vision of your life, squaring off with your desire to just prosper financially. Jupiter may be at odds, and you may be dealing with that question and answer maybe a little bit more than you thought you would. Money doesn't make you happy. Earnings aren't everything. Those could be question marks and answers forthcoming in 2024. That's kind of my vibe. Any thoughts on any oracle speaking here?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I love the way you put all that. And I would just say that as ideas are ready to change, guiding ideals or even ideologies, thought structures, as there is a transformation on the level of what ideas you're interested in or which ideas you want to guide your life, it will probably change the people that you surround yourself with. That new ideas mean new people, or a transformation of ideas means
Terrible big room entrance.
kind of allies or networks of people that you associate with. The card I pulled is the 8 of Cups. I can kind of see it holding it up to the camera there. And the 8 of Cups is interesting because it shows someone walking away under a moonlit sky from, 8 cups. And it's like, well, you're walking away from a lot. And I just wonder if that doesn't tap in a little bit to the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that will also be happening in the second house for Aries, where it's like there may be new ideas, new people, new groups, and it may cause you to have to walk away from some things that have really worked in the past. And there's a risk in that. And the 8 of Cups always suggests that if we want to go toward the completion of the 10 of Cups, at certain times you're going to have to leave some things behind. And it may feel like there's a risk in doing that, or there's it's a little bittersweet or something like that. But, forging ahead and leaving some things behind is a way of opening up room for more. That's one of the meanings I would take from that card coming up.
Yeah. Oh, I love that angle on it too. And yeah, absolutely. You can't. There's that old Zen parable. How do you carve the perfect elephant every time from the block of jade? That's the student says it to the master, and the master says, "I carve away all that is not elephant." Oh, that's funny. That's my dream about elephants last night. But anyway, and the gist of that is sometimes it's what we remove that defines where we are really meant to be, not what we add.
Nice.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you go first on the next one. We'll just kind of tag team. Does that sound like fun?
Oh, perfect.
Yay, me too. Okay, so let's move it to. I'm on days. I forgot. I had to move it forward to get.
What?
Pluto.
Like,
Let's go back
why?
to the hours. All right, moving it in, and you're on Taurus, which makes sense because you're Taurus rising, correct?
Right. Yeah, so it's interesting because obviously Pluto entering Aquarius in the 10th house, again, I would say when major thought structures are ready to change for Tauruses, they may be ready to change as your career or your life work is ready to change. So, thought structures changing, guiding ideas changing, paradigms changing in relation to work or career changing or public-facing identity changing. And this would be coinciding, of course, with Jupiter-Uranus in the first, which is suggesting that there's ways in which you're also fundamentally trying to open up new possibilities for yourself. How am I changing as a person? How is my identity, my body, my, the way I present myself to my world? How is my psychology changing? And then there's this close relationship with thought structures changing in the career arena. The card I drew is the Hanged Man.
Oh,
And-
lucky you.
right? So one of the things that comes to my mind with the Hanged Man is that there may be a period of time in which you have to wait. You have to be very patient in allowing for I mean, and the Hanged Man makes sense on a certain level because Jupiter Uranus wants to go forward and, open up and transform very rapidly. Pluto in Aquarius is slower moving, really slow transformation of bigger structures that have to do with your work in the world. And so, when you see
Why?
like the foot on the gas pedal with Jupiter Uranus, but then the slow weightiness of Pluto in the 10th, there may be some divine waiting that you have to do this year as a way of holding the tension between those two areas of transformation.
Yeah, I'm really liking that idea of also how the idea transformation within this Aquarian realm for each of the signs we're going through is really, the key piece, right? With the energy here too, I forgot to mention her, but she's situated, Minerva, the goddess of wisdom knowledge from the ancient traditions of wisdom and knowledge, like the counterpart to Athena, is wedged in there, and just for the ingress. And I'm like, well, if you are somebody who is a Taurus sun, moon, and rising, and you've got this electric shock of Uranus, like lightning bolts of change, but also kind of like more of like the third eye can like wide open up with Uranus energies. It's the aha, the light bulb, the moment of some kind of clarity, and Jupiter, wisdom, truth, and knowledge, and Minerva there as well, like really diving into this knowledge, truth, and wisdom archetype. Then it looks to me like a lot of Tauruses are going to have a revolutionary enlightenment, but not necessarily spiritual. It could be because Hangman has that halo, right? He's suspended, but he's got that like Odin on the world tree moment of illumination, which Odin got the runes. So it looks to me like some changes in the career are pending, and some of the early feeling of what's shifting is coming through this maybe insight or dramatic lightning bolt of self-identity. The first house really coming into a transformation, and it's going to take time to align that up with the changes that Pluto's putting in motion in your reputation, your career, your visible actions in the world. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think the seeds of that are very evident here in 24.
Nice.
Yeah, so Adam, are you quitting astrology?
I know, right?
No kidding.
No.
Okay, good.
Soon. As long as I have anything to do with it.
Oh my goodness, alrighty. So I'll start with Gemini. Gemini, sun, moon, and rising sign, especially rising. So the Pluto ingress into your 9th house, there's very metacosmos, between the worlds house, called the house of God traditionally. I find it's like if you go on the surface, it could be a lot of things. It could be foreign shores and book publishing and court and legal matters. But if you go a little bit deeper underneath, it's kind of very much about what that dharmic call is, like where are you here to align into a meaningful life. Where you feel like that your reason for being has purpose, that it's somehow you're being used by a greater calling, or even just flowing with the Tao. It could be any of those kinds of vibes. So it's a very spiritual home in which Pluto's entering, and he flows to you, Gemini, sun, moon, and rising. So he's not like really shaking at you over the next 2 decades. And so maybe in 2024, in this trine, this flow, trines are positive, they're Jupiterian by nature, you might find yourself being kind of more wide open to the kinds of spiritual philosophy, ideology, and meaning of life question marks being discovered and answered for you. At the same time, with that square at the ingress to the Jupiter part of your sky, I don't know, Jupiter here, he might have you, you overthrow your guru. Get rid of your spiritual teacher. Go deep into your psyche, into the sort of collective unconscious, your own unconscious, your past lives, your own self-sabotaging ways. And there may be some tension for a lot of Gemini, and I have a progressed Gemini sun, so I'm talking to myself about really having to break free a little bit, Uranus, Jupiter, of the shackles that you put on yourself, so that you can be more in alignment with this calling of the 9th house to be, in a purposeful and meaningful life. And some of those self-sabotaging 12th house things are often very subtle. So hopefully Jupiter Uranus is illuminating in 24.
Yeah,
that's what I've got.
Yeah, the card that I drew, Lori, is the 2 of Wands. And it's an interesting card. It shows an individual standing on like a precipice of what maybe like a castle wall or something. He's got 2 wands. He's holding a globe in his hand. He's looking out over the horizon. And to me, if you think about Pluto entering the 9th house, one thing that we could mention is that the 9th house was also associated with pilgrimage, travel abroad, places that are, expanding your horizons somehow. And sometimes that's education or spirituality or mystical experience. Sometimes it's literally travel to a different part of the world. But one thing for sure is that, again, as Lori was saying, Pluto in the ninth is trying to create a kind of, if you think of the ninth house as a place of our understanding, then Pluto is going to transform your way of understanding the world, yourself, so many different things. And it suggests a broadening of perspective in the air sign. When you consider Jupiter and Uranus in the 12th at the same time, one of the implications is that there is a world out there that is bigger than us. Like the 12th house, one of the meanings of the 12th house was where we lose control. Like the first house was considered the helm or like the steering wheel of the boat of life. The 12th was about experiences that take us away from having our hands on the steering wheel. Sometimes that's incredibly positive. Like a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the 12th, most positively spun, might be that world that's bigger than us that has something it promises us. And this guy's this person's looking out over the horizon. Like the world is my oyster. Like, what is out there for me? And where can I go? And what bigger adventures are there? What resources do I have available? But I see this as like almost like an indication of a philosophical broadening and an opening of possibilities, but also questions as to what I'm going to give myself over to that might be bigger and in some ways scarier.
Oh, yeah, I love that. Yes, of course, and the 12th house has that moksha liberation quality, as because you are sometimes falling away from the steering wheel is exactly what you need. It's that old country song, Jesus Take the Wheel, by Carrie Underwood.
Yeah, totally.
Jesus. Well, I love that. With my progressed son, I might have an opportunity to live in China for a couple of years. If that comes to pass, I'll be living into this realist, literal, like it's a whole new world. It's something big, a new horizon opens up.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is kind of cool. I love that Carrie Underwood song. Makes me laugh. Okay, moving into Cancer. That's your turn now. Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising, folk. Here we go.
Yeah, interesting. So Pluto entering the 8th house. There's a lot of people get really scared about the 8th house. Death, and one of the things that we have to remember is that the 8th house is like the waiting room for the 7th, insofar as planets in that place are being brought down in time to the setting point where they disappear in the west. So
Still
for that
23.
reason, the anticipation of setting is associated with the anxiety the anxiety of death. What sets is also what reaches a place of resolution. So those karmic bills that come due eventually, but also the things that come to us from other people that are due or owed somehow karmically. So it has this very, like, you get what's coming to you in the 8th, and so there's this very punitive, fearful, anxious connotation. But it's also all those things that are coming to you from other people and places in life that may admire you. For example, the 8th house is called the esteem of other people, which means that the way that people really value you and really appreciate you will be a part of the gifts that Pluto has to bring. It'll change your life by virtue of the people that take interest in you, or the people that want to support you in some ways, or the people that you're bonded to, and the kinds of changes coming in their lives that may bring in new resources. So there's a lot more than just death and fear and anxiety, although there is a kind of like, this is where karmic bills do come due. But on that note, I would say that, life is going to start changing pretty dramatically according to the give and take and the value exchanges of your most intimate relationships. It's like soul contracts with other people are about to change your life. And that coincides with Jupiter and Uranus in the 11th, trying to perhaps open up or bring exciting new possibilities with groups of people, or collaborations with other people. The card that I drew is the Justice card. Now, the Justice card,
perfect.
It's like sometimes people get freaked out by the Justice card, but it's really just about, old stuff that is coming to be resolved karmically. It's also about the gifts that are given and the debts that are paid off, and the debts that come due, as well as the blessings that come due. And Justice is really, you have to remember, when we look at Justice, it's really a neutral card. It's not a card that says bad things are coming, because we tend to think like justice means punishment, but it doesn't. It means justice, and that can be a very good thing. And it'll probably be mixed over the course of almost 2 decades with Pluto in the 8th house. But we're also going to learn very carefully about how to keep a careful watch on the relationships we're in and the give and take of those relationships. If you're a Cancer rising, you'll become more attentive to if you're giving too much, or if you're not giving enough in return. Those kinds of balancing acts you'll get a lot better at, and you may also find that new people need to come into your life so that the give and take is more appropriate.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I didn't know about the esteem of other people. That's a new learning for me. Thank you for that. I sometimes go very Vedic astrology on myself, with the moksha houses, and I always find that the 8th house perfection ages, when people go through them, are like they're going into a cocoon, really, or chrysalis state, and they come out the other end, deeply transformed at a level of their identity. Because in the moksha of that house, the spiritual liberation of that house, it has to do with a divestment of ego. And I find that when Pluto's there, if anyone's going to really take you into a journey of letting go of a sense of self in order to find a larger, truer self, that's going to do it. Because of that square to Jupiter, I wonder, Jupiter being guru, teacher, other meanings too, there could be some kind of need to dissociate from some kind of group that you have always connected to. Like you've always just belonged somehow, even if you don't officially belong, like you identified with. And you're going to have some, I think, radical changes here in those definitions. When you talked about who I belong to as a group, as you change yourself, inside yourself, and you're no longer I am, whatever you think you are, identity, ego, consciousness, then you're going to change who you associate with. And I think there's going to be some feelings of friction in 2024 as the beginning, a nascent transformation of identity through the 8th house. So we're moving into not just, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a teacher, but what am I really? Who am I? What is this consciousness? Anyway, so it's very spiritual to me. On a practical level, of course, it does have to do sometimes with shared monies with partners and resources with other people, and those can be transforming dramatically as well. And when you talked about justice and people being afraid of that card, I don't know. To me, it's always about the divine balancing act. I mean, that justice card brings things back into a divine balance, So I'm never afraid of the archetype of justice in that way. I think that's about it. I don't want to say that, because don't you have a Cancer placement too?
My Sun and Mercury are in Cancer.
I thought so, your Sun, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a lot of Cancers in my life too, but I kind of feel that this is a year ahead in which there will be some significant internal work that leads to a very significant outer picture of how we associate, affiliate, and connect to those larger groups of connections in our lives. All righty. I love the cards you're drawing. They're just seemingly very on, aren't they?
I love it. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like there's a good flow.
Yeah, they are. Leo's sun, moon, and rising sign, it is a really intense energy you're going to have in the house of any others in your life that are important to you. And it is usually considered to be about marriage partner. But it can also be just a very significant relationship in your life, people that matter a lot and factor in a longevity way, like a committed connection to them. But also I find that, one of the things I've learned about the 7th, 10th from the 10th in derived houses, it looks a lot like your clients, your marketplace, your audience, the people you reach from your career activities, and those are transforming as well. So those significant love and long-term partnerships, maybe some of your way you reach out to your people that you need to be in contact with through your 10th house activities, your career, is going to be transforming and changing over the next few years, but you'll start to get some taste of it in 2024. When Jupiter in the career space up there with Uranus, reputation, career, you're very much looking at some tension between maybe, literally, someone important to you and things that you're doing to succeed, because you're very lucky up there right now, very successful until the end of May, and or just some real tension between your successful objectives that are really looking good on you here with Jupiter up in your 10th house and dramatically exciting after the April conjunction of Uranus and Jupiter, and some thing going on in that 7th house. And because it's not you, it can be a Plutonian character, right? Somebody who acts a little bit dominating or controlling, maybe in your face in the next year ahead. Maybe at odds with what you're trying to do in your expansion in your 10th house. That's one thought. It could be very literal. Like, is that a tyrannical friend, a tyrannical client, a dictatorial wife or husband? So at a very practical level, I get some of those gnarly attentions, but What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, you know, the card that I drew is the Fool. And
Oh,
such a strong archetype. I think that if we, I will think about this. I'll say more about the Fool in a second. But first of all, let's just say, if Pluto enters the seventh in Aquarius, for Leos, one of the things it does is it holds up to you a kind of mirror, right? In and through relationships, relationships start acting as this mirror upon which, you know, you can reflect and contemplate who you are and the ideas by means of which you think about who you are. And
Come
you know,
on.
people can enter your life,
Why?
not just now, but in the course of the next years, that start saying, hey, have you considered that this is the idea that you're identified with? And you go, wait, I didn't think that was me, but well, maybe I am. Maybe that is part of how I've identified. Or they could say, hey, have you considered this other idea about who you might be? Oh, wow, that's really different. So I think that if you think about it as a kind of revolution of thought and ideas about who you are that are being introduced through powerful, meaningful, deep relationships with other human beings, that's one of the things that comes to my mind for Pluto and Aquarius. Also, there's something you may want to be pressing reset or completely transforming your relationships, which takes you into Fool territory, right? Many outer planets I've seen enter the seventh house, and people go, oh, maybe there's something better out there, and then a love affair or something comes up, and you don't know if you're the Fool about to walk off the cliff, or if you're following an impulse to go in a new direction that will ultimately be really positively transforming your life. Sometimes it's both.
Why?
And then I think, you know, Jupiter Uranus in the 10th has a similar kind of Fool energy insofar as there's like, hey, let's do brand new things around career. Okay, well, you know,
Thought he had
some of
passed
the way in which
away.
Jupiter Uranus comes through can be a little bit like the Fool insofar as it's like there's so much excitement, there's so much enthusiasm, and in a sense you cannot know where it's going. You just, like the Fool, you have to just take to the highway and let it play out. On the other hand, you know, using the Fool almost always speaks to the need for some discernment. Like, just be just a little bit cautious. You don't want to be so cautious that you kill the spirit of the Fool going on a mission with a kind of youthful naivete that is part of the journey. But you don't want to be so naive and ignorant that you throw yourself off the cliff. So there's a kind of a balance here in introducing powerful new things in relationships and career and embracing the newness while also, you know, just being a little cautious and careful not to go too far too quickly.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought the shadow part up. You know, the kind of like, this is classic
Oh, that
Jungian
was pretty
shadow work
fucking
to have
good.
Pluto going through the house of the other, because they'll display
Pretty
all of
good.
your disowned self for you right up in your, they'll excavate the parts of yourself you've disowned by mistake, and you'll see it in your face. And born with a Pluto in my seventh, I can attest to that. All right. Well, it depends on Placidus is my seventh, which I used to think it was true, but pole sign it's in my eighth. All right, we're moving in to the next sign. And I love the Fool card. The best I think about the Fool is you kind of operate from more of an innocence as well. You know, like, this is a game of life. I'm going to play it. Like, it can be risky because you might not be, as you said, you know, you might act foolishly. But also, it kind of embeds a willingness to find the goodness in all of life, you know, kind of playfully investigate what life is about. You said something in your channel that was very much about the Fool in one of your readings from your journal. It was that long one I really enjoyed, and it really reminded me of the Fool archetype. You know, it's the one where you're dialoguing with the sky. This is a recent one on one of your Pluto videos. It's like, you're gonna, you know, this is a game. You know, you can't argue with the rules, and you didn't actually build the game board.
Right.
Somebody else did it. Alrighty, I think it was called God. All right. All right, you got the Virgos.
Yeah. So
Come on.
the card that I drew is really fascinating. It's the Six of Cups. And the Six of Cups shows
I hate
like
this
almost
game.
like
I
two
really hate it.
kids sort of like exchanging gifts, or like giving a gift or something like this. And it has this kind of youthful, nostalgic, whimsical quality to it. And to me, it's one of the more enigmatic cards. And it's interesting because I've actually pulled this card a few times this autumn, like since about the fall equinox, in relation to some personal questions. And so I've gotten to know the card, and you know how it always hits different when it's like oh, wait, I have no idea how this card pertains to my situation. Then you live it out for a couple of months and you go like, oh, wow. So, at any rate, I'll tie this in a second, but Pluto entering the sixth is a fascinating place because the sixth house was traditionally called the joy of Mars. It was called the house of misfortune. But we have to understand what that meant for ancient astrologers and why Mars was associated with it. For the ancients, misfortune was not like misfortune was a normal part of life. You're on a walk to the market, you stub your toe and you break your big toe or something. Like that's life. It happens. How do you meet that? Mars was the planet of courage and conviction. It was the planet that was associated with perseverance and the quality you had to draw upon to overcome things and to draw from, like drawing water from a stone, this very sixth house. Like how do I get the most out of something even when I'm feeling stifled, blocked, prohibited, frustrated, aggravated? I'm in the middle of the, this or that. And it's really important. And I get a cold. How do I? The sixth house and the quality of perseverance, courage, determination, hard work, sacrifice that build up within us the success in really any area of life. Relationships. You're going to have a quality relationship. You have to know how to fight well and persevere and get through the hard stuff of the shadows of the relationship. Your work, same thing. Your health, same thing. Your family. There's no area in life that doesn't require us to display a kind of existential grit.
Come on, man.
And if we do, we find that we are rewarded. We're rewarded mostly because we feel stronger, more capable, and confident within us. And the reward is that difficult experiences are no longer doubly difficult because we fear or judge them. They become just part of the tapestry of life, and suddenly we find that we are resilient people, and that draws and attracts things to us in life that are very positive and powerful. So when Pluto's entering this house, it suggests that you're going to have new problems and new thoughts and means by which to handle them and work through them. And this also can mean that there are new things that you're going to feel very deeply compelled to suffer and sacrifice on behalf of. Mars was the god of passion. Passion means what you love, but that you carry as it kind of burns your hands while you carry it. So when Pluto enters the sixth house for Virgos, I think of new things that you're going to love, but you're going to, for example, as this is entering the sixth house in my 8-year-old daughter's chart last year, she got interested in gymnastics. It's coming back around. I'll find her in the basement, literally sweat pouring down as she's practicing her gymnastics. This is something she's passionate about, right? Pluto entering the sixth will give new passions, new things we're willing to sweat on behalf of, right? And then it gradually offers us gifts because we've put in a certain amount of sacrifice, which is also why the sixth house is associated with service, right? Because there's a sacrificial attitude with service that is its own gift and reward. The Jupiter-Uranus connection in the ninth, to me, suggests that there could be some really big breakthroughs around spirituality, religion, philosophy, that are going along with it, the things that we're newly passionate about, or the places that we're having to persevere and develop strength through. Now, so when I see this card, this is interesting because I see a juxtaposition that says, look, wherever you're heading, there's going to be the need for sweetness, tenderness, gentleness, a childlike kind of innocent quality, because you don't want Pluto in the sixth or Jupiter-Uranus's accompanying movement in the ninth to create an intensity that makes you so white-knuckled that you can't enjoy the things that you're working on or the things that you're sacrificing for. Like, I asked my daughter, she's sweating in the basement doing it. I said, are you happy? Are you enjoying what you're doing? She goes, I love it. So I see the Six of Cups and I say, for Virgos, like, you're gonna love.
Stretch sucks, man.
Sure to love what you're doing and stay sweet and gentle and tender in what you're doing. So you don't want it to get so serious that you lose that quality.
Wow, yeah, it's a great card for that placement as well. I mean, it brings a nice softness to it all. Yeah, so my feeling too is like I just talked to the Leo risings, and any Leo risings can tell you how that already went. But I know a few Leo people who definitely also, not only did they like Pluto, like in really literal like death, and sixth house, the job or the work, and they retired during that transit since 2008. And some of them at ages where retirement wasn't even needed. You know what I mean? They like that. I'm done with that service, that job, that path of work. because it is a house that's often associated with the work and the work you do in the world. And it's an interesting placement too, because yeah, you said like misfortune, and the ancient world looked at a lot of things as misfortune. One of them was slavery, being, you know, abducted into slavery by a conquering, you know, peoples, or having to be a tenant serf and not having ownership of your property. In other words, being in service to the lord of the land. And there's a sense there that, you know, with Pluto, I think Pluto's power. Like, I think that, you know, if you were slaving away in a job that you didn't like over the next 20 years, you're going to leave it. You're going to transform it, because you're going to be empowered, and you're going to find, yeah, like that perseverance and resilience of the Mars factor. But Mars cuts too. So, you know, where can you end some, you know, travail of work that may be very challenging and no longer needed? And or no longer true. I mean, because at the end of the day, Jupiter says what's true up here, what's dharmic, what's in your path of, you know, as if you had a spiritual pastor talking to the whole ordeal this year and going, Jupiter up there, going, you know, you really don't look like you're in alignment with your work. What do you think? And there's this kind of push-pull to find a truer place for the work you're here to do in the world, and maybe even more so to find a deeper meaning, a service in that place. And I listened to an Indian astrologer one time who talked about the sixth house being the place of our karmic debts being paid. Like, we pay the dues there, so we are of service or seva, and we pay the dues, and saying that because we can pay the dues, we get the rewards of the 11th. And so I guess, you know, Pluto would say, well, pay your dues with power, with intensity, and, you know, and in the short term, 2024, Jupiter says, let's align.
It makes me just want to go directly to the crouching glass.
Jupiter is pushing against Pluto.
It makes me just want to go directly to the crouching glass. Like, honestly,
try to keep it true. Yeah. I wish the very best for all of my Virgos, because I'm surrounded by them, okay? Like, in my real life, they're all over me. My friends and my kids and everything. Alrighty. Whose turn is it? Is that one? Yeah, thank you. Libra, Sun, Moon, and Rising sign. What we've got going on is your 5th house Pluto ingress, and don't be afraid. I know I have a lot of people tell me they're terrified that their kids are going to die.
I think I'm just going to not do it anymore.
This is a transformation of what I always think of as kind of like the incubator of your creativity, your muse, your inspiration. You birth babies, you birth books, you birth
just that terrible.
You know, projects, you birth businesses here. So Pluto is going to help you kind of be very fertile, but fertile in a way of what is truly empowering your inspiration, enthusiasm, and joy in life. And what isn't really, because it is a Saturn sign, as you said, demarcating the boundaries between things. I kind of like it here if you are somebody who wants to really move into an authentic level of expression in any creative or artistic or even entrepreneurial energy, that you have something you want to just full on go with. And in 24, some of those impulses may become more evident. But I do know that the square to Jupiter and Minerva and Uranus in the 8th house can be maybe feeling challenged a little bit in 2024 around resources, maybe finances that you have share with another, a marriage partner or business partner, maybe longer range monies, investments, 401ks, things that you put in your treasure chest. For the most part, when I see Jupiter here, and they'll be here to the end of May, I actually observe people having financial bounty coming from unexpected and unearned income, usually, you know, chunks of money, I call it. And so there is that promise here. But I wonder if, you know, you're still going to be in a push-pull.
I think I got to continue with the strat, though, honestly.
Your children, they need money from you, and you don't necessarily want to give it all up from your savings and your 401k, or push-pull between your, as I said, creative and artistic endeavors, and something to do with the financial resources. I'm being very practical right now and not esoteric with the 8th house, because I find 5 and 8 are both often associated with money issues, as are 11 and 2. So bringing in the monetary side of this, no matter what, you're going to be more bounteous by the end of May with Jupiter moving direct here. And yet you've got some kind of intensity in your 5th house. And that can also involve some intensity around romantic.
Oh my god, please, please, game, please.
I loved a card for this one, because I really wasn't sure where to go on this one.
No, you're fine. So I pulled the Chariot. So you were talking about push and pull, and I think that is one of the great traditional significations of the Chariot, is you have the two different, you know, like sort of like the horses that pull the chariot. They're like Sphinx. and one is black and one is white. So you have the idea of the yin and yang, or the opposites. And the charioteer, sits on the chariot, which is obviously a metaphor. The chariot, for example, throughout Hinduism, you have the Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita sitting on the chariot in the middle of the battlefield, on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and Krishna is the charioteer. He's the one driving. Well, there's an interesting way in which, the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita is about teaching him how to drive the chariot himself. It's like, here's this guru that's sitting there being like, I'm your charioteer, I'm here to help you drive, but we're going to sit and have a long conversation, all of which is metaphorically about how to work with opposing forces in our lives. For example, the initial opposing force that directs Arjuna is the desire to flee the battlefield. Like, screw this, let's just go to a cave to meditate.
Yeah, I would put that as a tragedy.
Which is an understandable impulse, and then
I mean, it was a really
or impulse to engage in action.
It was a very unlikely chance of survival, but I would put that as a tragedy.
Whether it's that, any kind of tension between the opposites is usually depicted by the chariot.
Dude, we're so close, man. We're so close, dude. Like, we're so fucking close.
By being holding the reins and being masterful with the tension of opposites, which is how we navigate through life. Well, if we apply that to Libras, you think about the fifth house impulse, which the fifth house, one time heard it described by an Indian astrologer as the joy derived from one's dharma, because it's a trine to the first house, which was called dharma. And there's some sense of the fifth house being associated with the joy
that was a good run,
pleasure
though.
that should come from inhabiting your true self.
It was a great
and your
dark
true
room.
gifts and so forth. Pluto might be starting to say, hey, you know what? Are you really joyful? Are you really happy? Are you really inhabiting yourself and your gifts? Is there a way that more happiness could come through being and doing yourself? So if that's a very personal emphasis. The eighth house, on the other hand, is creating all these tremendous breakthroughs, but that eighth house by nature entangles us in reciprocal relationships with other people, soul contracts with other people. So where there's tremendous openings, but those openings come through dependency, they come through relationship, whereas there's also some shift that has to do with the need for my own personal creative joy and autonomy. Well, those are maybe those are the opposites that we're trying to work with, and the push and pull, which I would see reflected in all that Lori was saying about the different ways in which the eighth and the fifth could pull. Children versus money, shared finances versus personal creativity.
See, I like that right strafe so much more. I'm so much more used to it. I don't know if it reduces the frequency of that mainframe, but maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do
right
have
strafe,
some Libras
like, a
in my
million
head too,
times
and what you
more.
just said really fits as well about the Dharma element and the joy of one's path. Are you there in the joy? Yeah, that really works for some of the Libra dilemmas I know out there.
Right.
Alrighty, yeah, I think this is you. No, me. No, who's first?
This is me this time, I think.
Good. Don't ask me about menopause brain, okay? Like, I wish, I never wish it on a man in my life.
That's funny. Okay.
Poor women.
Well, a really interesting.
Thank you,
we've
women,
had
for
a
going
bunch
through
of
menopause.
Twos come up so far, or a couple twos.
I wish you didn't have to.
The card I drew for Scorpio ascendant, or whatever you're listening to, for Scorpio is Two of Cups. And you see this kind of alchemical marriage depicted here. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Jupiter, Uranus.
I didn't BB to that
seventh
stupid
house.
comment at the start. Okay,
Pluto
thank
doing
God.
its transformative work around home, family, roots. To me, this means that Scorpios are going to be looking, for example, at the way in which your relationships have been shaped or transformed over time by the relationship dynamics that were a part of your home or family. On the other hand, it could mean that you're ready to start your own home or family, or it could be that key relationships are coming into your life that have the power to almost like create a new foundation from which to work from. Pluto in the fourth to me suggests like rebuilding or reconfiguring the base of your life psychically, emotionally. And then Jupiter Uranus suggests that maybe that's happening as there are new exciting openings in relationships taking place. So I love this pairing as, again, home, family, and relationships, big work and change in those areas, pretty straightforward. But then the Two of Cups suggesting the possibility for new, like, alchemical relationships or bonds being created, which could have a very powerful effect this year.
Yeah, I love that card for this as well. It really does have a nice spin too. It's very positive in general, those Two of Cups energies. You know, with Pluto down the bottom of the sky too, and it is literally, you know, your family of origin, maybe your mom and dad, maybe the kind of the ancestral or familial stories that you grew up with. And Pluto will pretty well have you dig under the surface over the next 20 years, you guys, you Scorpios, to
See,
look
it's
at
so much
more squarely
faster.
at what's underneath, you know, like or to look more deeply, you know, into it. Because, you know, I find Pluto here can often reveal to people what is really going on. Like, I mean, talk about things under the surface, right? We're in the midnight of the sky, in the darkest part of the sky, and now we've got the god of things that are hidden maybe being revealed through excavation. So I think a lot of you will go through a period, not only over the next 2 decades, but this year ahead, of kind of like maybe discovering things to do with hidden and unseen elements of your family of origin, your tales of your family, your ancestral stories as well, that can really maybe sometimes hit you in a tension aspect with a significant seventh house connections, relationships, you know, maybe your marketplace, your audience. But the other thing about it to me is that, you know, you're being deeply terraformed. Like there's something going on here. And I think at this point, it will really feel like you have to really root yourself in what is maybe uncomfortable, but really necessary in order for you to really thrive in that Jupiter seventh house storyline, you know, because that is classic level up a relationship, really, whatever ones that matter to you. And yeah, you have to do it from a really deeply, authentically true, rooted power, not because, you know, your partner wants you to marry them tomorrow, or your client needs you yesterday and you're on call, or, you know, or you lose yourself to the service of others or to the expansion into others that Jupiter here could bring on for you. So there's kind of like, to me, it's very soul worky to have Pluto on the bottom of the sky here in a moksha house. Yeah. So let's see what's next. My son's a Scorpio rising, FYI. He's always getting called out on my channel. So with Pluto in the first house, right? And you know, that old Pluto in the first house or Scorpio risings might feel really comfy, but boy, has he lived a life full of confronting his mortality at a very young age, and a few reckless episodes of death-defying experiences. So here we have
Wow.
Sagittarius. It is me, right? Yeah. You guys are like looking at Sun, Moon, and Rising Sagittarius, an entry point of Pluto into your third house. I always call it the kitchen sink, junk drawer, whatever. There's a lot of things we say about that Cadent house, but you know, it can be very practically about your writing or your communications projects. It can be siblings, especially younger. It can be things to do with your neighbors and neighborhood. And often people from your childhood are here, like your friends that you grew up with in school, at, you know, elementary or even high school. So this is a really powerful transformation energy that's starting up for you this year, and over the next 20 years you're feeling it, and how you want to deal with all of those elements of your reality. But because ideas can be generated here as well, I think you may be really ruminating over some powerful thoughts that are going to be appearing to you over the next few years. And it sextiles you, so you're not in a disagreement with it necessarily. You're rather chill with the whole thing of Pluto in your third house. And you could transform those relationships with those siblings, for example, if needed, like redefine them. I'd kill them off and restart them. But I think the square to Jupiter in the sixth house kind of makes me feel like you may have very practical tensions in 2024 about what you're trying to do to provide, to expand, to grow, to be prosperous, to be abundant in your work and the work you do in the world, one of the easy means of that sixth house, and to even be healthy, to prevail against illness or sickness, and things that are pulling you to transform third house matters. And you know, it's kind of like third house matters may not even be about you. It could be a powerful story going on with someone else, like a sibling, like a childhood friend, that is giving you some kind of tension with the work story in 2024. Because I definitely, with that Jupiter-Uranus pending, there's going to be some major, exciting, you know, transformation and shifts coming through in the work you do in the world, Sagittarius. But there's this intensity in the third. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, the card I drew, initially I was like, what? And then I thought about it and I was like, oh, okay. So I drew the Hierophant. And the Hierophant was, you know, one of the names that was given to it at different points in time, one of the names that it had was the Pope, but it also called the Hierophant.
Why?
One of the things that you have to pay attention to with this card is the fact that people are going to the Pope and receiving a benediction. So they're receiving a blessing. They're seeking a blessing. And I think to get this card, you have to set aside resistance to wounds with judgments of institutional religion, because it's really not about, it doesn't have to be, I mean, sometimes it'll show up and it'll actually have a connection in context to those things, but archetypally speaking, whenever we sit down and let's just say you say a prayer to the universe or your higher self or whatever word you use, and you say, please help me with this, or I need some help with that, or whatever, and you ask and then you receive. That process of like putting a prayer or an intention or something out there, and then something being granted or denied through the medium of asking, that's the Hierophant. I just read this beautiful essay on the Hierophant in a book on the Tarot that I'm reading with a friend, and it was talking about how the Hierophant serves as the process of appealing to cosmic authority, the gods, whatever you want to call it, and that there is some belief that in acting ritually, whether you have an altar and you pray to Ganesh or anything, that host of the statue of Ganesh is like the Hierophant, insofar as you pray to it and it has some way of interacting with you to help or teach or guide or give or whatever. So when I see this, I go, this is really interesting, because you could read it in two ways. Pluto entering Aquarius could very well be, I mean, remember that the third house is like the ninth house. It is about philosophy and learning and mind and, the way in which we interface through thought with the world. And so I wonder if the things and people and places we look to, that whether we look to them for approval or we look to them for resources or support, and that who and what do you approach for help or resources or benefits, or blessings, and there could be a really significant change in terms of saying, like, for example, if I tend to look at all of my superiors at work and I say I really need their approval, and if I have their approval, then I ascend on the hierarchy of the company. The Hierophant comes up with Pluto in the third, and it says to me, like, you may find that you're appealing to the wrong authorities. That there's almost like remember one of the third house significations that Stephen Forrest used all the time is the heretic. But there's something, because it's oppositional to the ninth house.
I think I'm just too loud. I think
like, be a free thinker.
Wasn't right back.
Isn't some revolution where what you consider to be a higher authority that you tend to petition is not going through a radical.
Well, he's welcome
shift,
here, man. He's welcome to come back, of
philosophical
course.
or religious or at the workplace or something.
Just
like
some
that.
proof.
Yeah, I love that too. Yeah, and the heretic, I didn't even think about that angle. It is also the house of the goddess, and Demetra George likes to point out that she thinks that that's where the diviners are, the oracles.
Yeah,
She thinks it's
man.
like you go to the marketplace, or there's a gypsy with a fortune telling spot, and you get your fortunes told. So it's more of an energy of moving away from that structure, like of the ninth house of God, which involves religion. And where is the highest authority? Where do you lean into? Who are you listening to in life as your authority?
Right, and I mean, like, I could see, for example, if you tend to be the person who tends, like, you externalize authority into, like, the workplace or a religion or a dogma or a doctrine, this might be where, working with an oracle and drawing cards for yourself would be very third house.
Yeah, the left strafe, it does set it up better, kind of.
You take literally everything Course in Miracles has to say, which is fine. Like, I love that or whatever, but this could be like, instead of relying on Course in Miracles for the truth about everything philosophically, I'm going to pull a card every morning. Like, that could be a change in terms of, like, who and what you're approaching as a guiding authority in your life.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Oh, that was a good one. Yay, I'm thinking of all my Saggies that I know. All right.
This
This is you, because I was thinking, I get Aquarius, that's me.
Interesting. I like this one a lot. Okay, so Pluto enters the second, Jupiter and Uranus in the fifth. First of all, I love Pluto entering the second as su- suggesting that there's a change in income and expenditures. Like very basically, whether it's your philosophy, it's how you handle money, not just money though, time, energy,
Oh my
money,
God.
resources. Resources could be emotional, they could be financial. Second house is about what we have or are in possession of, as well as what we want to develop that may help like prop up our existence. So people develop skills in the second, people make money in the second, people spend money in the second. It's really about like it's like your personal little marketplace. All of your own goods, services, ideas, resources, what you take in, what you want, what you're developing, what you're growing in your garden, as well as the energy that kind of goes out. So when Pluto enters, it's like, okay, there's a paradigm change around your resources and how you use them, or what they are, or what they look like, or the guiding thoughts or philosophies around business or money. So that's a really positive change. Well, Jupiter Uranus, to me, is suggesting a creative renaissance, rebirth, and awakening in a
Why?
house that really has to do with creative fulfillment. Am I feeling happy and creatively fulfilled in life? Now, you could see mundane things like money and kids coming up, kind of like we were talking about earlier. The card that I drew is the Four of Swords, which is a really interesting card because here it suggests almost like there's a couple different ways of reading this card. It's a very meditative card that suggests like, almost like you're visiting someone's grave and you're quietly reflecting and remembering them or something. It's like this peaceful card of like death and rest and reflection and stuff like that. But another way of looking at this is as kind of like an appreciation for what's come before. I sometimes see this card come up when there's something like ancestral legacy, like something that has provided for you in the past that you are feeling deeply appreciative of. So one of the things that I could see coming up here would be like a creative legacy, like some kind of emotional or creative inheritance that you're coming to really appreciate and reflect and embody, something that you've learned or that came before you somehow. I could also see this card as just a moment of reflection. Okay, Pluto's entering the second in an air sign. There's a death, there's a releasing of an old way of doing things around money, resources, and maybe some new creative energy coming in this year. But there's also an invitation to like really reflect and be sort of slow and deliberate in the new things that you're creating, like a reflective, contemplative energy that's being encouraged.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And it's interesting too, if you get all on the literal stuff, things that are, they're connected to our mouth and our jaw, our throat, the things we ingest are also in the second house, So it's very possible then that there's also going to be some deeper
This is Tiananmen Square. Lots of good fighting has gone on here throughout the years, including a fantastic massacre that took place back in '93. He turns back to the shrub and peers through it. The Chinese are pleasantly involved in conversations. Russell turns back to the camera. These Chinamen can grow to over 5 feet tall, and in a fight, are known to kick with their legs. Let's see if we can get in for a closer look. Picks up the shrub and goes further into the crowd, then peers through. Making movies, making songs and fighting around the world. Cut to Brooklyn, with the Brooklyn Bridge in the background. A lot of brown stones here. Russell has brought his shrew with him again. He approaches the camera. Oi. Now Tug has brought me to one of the greatest places for fighting in North America. Backs up, Brooklyn, New York. Lots of minorities here, and they don't take kindly to Whitey. Points to himself. Let's get a closer look. Come on, Tugger.
And
In the year 1858, the French novelist Gustave Flaubert arrived in North Africa, hoping to find inspiration for his latest book. Flaubert was a seasoned traveller, and a decade or so earlier had embarked on a grand tour of Cairo, Constantinople, Greece, and Italy. But the writer who now departed on this new set of travels was like a different man. Although only 37 years old, he was plagued by sickness and prone to fits of depression. And the novel he had been working on for the last year was threatening to drive him mad. The publication of his most famous work 2 years before, the novel Madame Bovary, had brought him fame and wealth, but now he was attempting to write a piece of fiction quite unlike anything he had ever attempted. It would be a story from classical history that took place in an empire that had once flourished in the north of Africa, had become the most powerful society in the ancient world, and then had vanished in its entirety more than 2,000 years ago. An empire that had been largely forgotten beside the more well-studied societies of classical Greece and Rome. This was the Empire of Carthage. He had spent the last months locked up in his study like a hermit, surrounded by the work of ancient historians, trying to bring the lost city of Carthage back to life. But the writing just wouldn't come, as he wrote to his friend, Ernest Feydeau.
I'm done for, my friend. Done for. For the past month, I've found it impossible to write. I can't find a single word. Just think of what I've let myself in for. To resuscitate an entire civilization with nothing whatsoever to go on.
Flaubert made the decision that something would have to change. He wrote of his intentions to his friend, Mademoiselle Le Royer de Chantepie.
I absolutely must take a trip to Africa. So, toward the end of March, I'll return to the land of dates. Once again, I live on horseback and sleep under a tent. I need only to go to El Kef and explore the environs of Carthage in order to acquaint myself thoroughly with the landscapes I'll be describing.
When he arrived in Tunisia, Flaubert jotted down hurried impressions in his notebooks as he explored the ruins of the ancient cities of Utica and Carthage, now all but buried beneath the modern Tunisian capital of Tunis.
In the green wheat, full of flowering poppies, the road climbs a little, sloping to the left and arrives at a valley, flat plains in the middle, at a league's distance, ruins like palm trees and here and there blocks of masonry. We are walking on the remains of a Roman road.
As he walked among the ruined walls of this ancient city, Flaubert felt himself connected to the ancient people he had been trying to write about, and saw ways of life that must have remained almost unchanged since the days of Carthage.
In the south, the village of Sidi Bou Said, the sea behind, like a great block of indigo. All Carthage now stretches out before me, A camel on a terrace, turning at well. Flies are buzzing, weeds hanging from the halls like chandeliers. A bird takes flight with the sound of a wing. Another sings, very fine dust, silence, green marks on the walls, livid and thick water in some basins.
By the time he had finished his wanderings among the Carthaginian ruins of Tunisia, Flaubert had decided to completely rewrite the draft of his book, as he writes to Mademoiselle de Chantepie.
Everything I had done on my novel has to be done over. I was on the wrong track entirely. So it turns out that a little over a year since I first had the idea for the book, and after working hard on it most of that time, I am still only at the beginning.
Armed with his Tunisian notebooks, Flaubert finished his book 4 years later, and it was published under the title of Salammbô. The book was an enormous success. It inspired plays and later even silent films, and it is credited with renewing public interest in a city and a culture that had once been considered a side note of history. As Flaubert walked those ruined walls and sunken harbours, as he kicked his way through the dust and scree of the crumbling city ruins, he must have asked himself again and again, what did it feel like to walk the streets of that ancient city? What was it like to see Carthage at the height of its golden age? And what would it have felt like to see this entire city, its streets and houses, its temples and theatres, its harbours and its homes, utterly destroyed and buried in dust and ash?
Guys, you know how people say, what are you passionate about? I think I'm passionate about learning. I think I realize that. I think I'm passionate about discovering and sharing discoveries. And not so much like patiently sitting down with someone and teaching.
And you're listening to the Fall of
More
Civilizations podcast.
the forefront, cutting
Each
edge of
episode,
knowledge of
I look at the
humanity. I think that's really my
civilizations
passion.
that rose to glory and
So I
then
don't like to
collapsed
teach,
into the ashes of
but I like to
history.
do
I want
and
to
learn.
ask, what did they have in common? What led to their fall? And
I
what
think that's
did
why I
it
like
feel
speedrunning
to be a
so much, because
person
there's so much
alive at the
learning.
time, who witnessed the end of their world. In this episode, I want to tell one of the most dramatic stories to come
There's a
down
lot of
from the ancient
blowing
world,
people's minds
the
and what you
rise
thought
and
was
fall
impossible.
of the Empire of Carthage. I want to show how this city rose out of the Phoenician states of the Eastern Mediterranean and set out on voyages of discovery and settlement.
And for the
that
friendship
put
with you
them
guys
at
and
the
girls.
center of the
And
ancient world.
all types of
I want to
sexes.
describe the
genders.
unique culture that flourished on the shores of North Africa. And I want to tell the story of how the city of Carthage was destroyed and its memory nearly wiped from the earth.
Oh, come on. I knew he was stuck too.
The Mediterranean Sea
I had
is a
3
vast
bullets
body
and
of
I
salt
did
water
not use them well.
that lies between the continents of Europe and Africa. It's by far the largest inland sea on the planet, stretching around 4,000 kilometers from end to end. And in the west, it's connected to the Atlantic Ocean by a thin opening at the Straits of Gibraltar. The coastline of this sea is more than 46,000 kilometers long, or enough to wrap around the entire circumference of the planet. And this coastline has provided a home to countless cultures and civilizations over history. One of these cultures emerged on the easternmost corner of the Mediterranean coast, on a stony stretch of shore in what is today Lebanon, overlooked by towering mountains covered in cedar forest. Here, a series of city-states rose up more than 4,000 years ago that would give rise to a culture that would one day be called the Phoenicians. The largest of these cities were named Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos. Pinched as they were between the waves to the west and the forested mountains to the east, the territories they ruled over were never large. But this relatively isolated geography also meant that they were somewhat protected from invaders. The people we now think of as Phoenician wouldn't have ever used that word. Phoenician is a term invented later by their great rivals, the Greeks, and it's unclear if these cities ever thought of themselves as a unified people. They had a common Phoenician language and were united by the worship of certain gods, among them Baal Hamon, a heroic god named Melkar, and his wife Astarte. But there's very little in the historical record to suggest a common identity, architecture, or literature. Even the Greek word Phoenician has a somewhat mysterious origin. In the earliest texts, such as Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the word Phoenike is used to describe a particular colour of purple or crimson, and it is also used to describe a date palm, possibly due to the reddish colour of its fruit when ripe. And so it's possible that the word came to be used as a result of one of the Phoenicians' earliest and most successful industries. The Phoenicians of Tyre and other cities were the first people to colour their clothes with a particular kind of dye, derived from the bodies of predatory sea snails known as the murex, or rock snail. These snails produce their dye as a defense mechanism against predators, and depending on the species, can produce a vivid red or purple colour quite unlike anything else available in the ancient world. From the moment these dyes were first used by Phoenicians around the 16th century BC, their colours became immediately sought after. But the process of producing these dyes was difficult and costly. It could take more than 50 kilograms of these snails to make a single gram of dye. And so these fabrics were extremely expensive. The colour purple would soon become associated with enormous wealth, and as a consequence with royalty. This colour would be known as Tyrian purple, after the Phoenician city of Tyre, and later imperial purple. It would dye the robes of the emperors of Assyria, Rome, and later Byzantium. The 1st century Roman writer, Pliny the Elder, writes about the effect this colour had on anyone who saw it.
For purple, the rods and axes of Rome clear a path, and it likewise marks the dignity of boyhood. It distinguishes senator from noble, and it is summoned to secure the favour of the gods. It illuminates every garment, and on the triumphal robe it is blended with gold. But why the price?
It's possible then that the term Phoenike came to be used by the Greeks to describe these traders from the rocky coast of Lebanon as the makers of purple, or the purple people. The name of the mythical creature, the phoenix, an immortal bird with red feathers, also seems to derive from the same word. With their dye industry booming, the Phoenicians began to set out on ever longer voyages out into the Mediterranean Sea, all in search of ever more of these priceless snails. And these longer voyages would require new developments in shipbuilding. Since as early as the 3rd millennium BC, Phoenician sailors from the city of Byblos had developed ships with curved hulls, perfectly suited for travelling on the waves. And they had developed techniques for waterproofing the hulls of their ships, using bitumen or pitch. In the Hebrew Bible, the 6th century BC book of Ezekiel contains one poetic description of a Phoenician ship.
They made all your timbers of
I'm doing well, how are
juniper
you?
from Semir. They took a cedar from Lebanon to make a mast for you. Of oaks from Bashan they made your oars.
Yeah,
Of cypress wood
I
from the
decided
coasts
not
of
to
Cyprus
look
they
for
made your deck,
a car right
adorned
now.
with ivory.
Didn't mean to. Time.
Fine embroidered linen from Egypt was your sail, and served as your banner.
Doing well. Yeah, thanks, man.
Your awnings were of blue and purple from the coasts of Elishar.
The Phoenicians
I
were
do,
also
yes.
some of the earliest people to notice the pole star,
Oh,
or
thank you,
Polaris,
Thanks.
a star that happens to align more or less perfectly with the rotational axis of the Earth. This means that while all other stars appear to rotate in the sky throughout the night as the Earth turns, the pole star remains more or less fixed in place. This made it exceptionally useful as a navigation tool, a fixed reference point in the sky. In Greek, this star would even come to be known as Phoenike, or the Phoenician star. The Phoenicians' early voyages around the Mediterranean led to them encountering many other people, and among these they began to cultivate a reputation as uncompromising traders and shrewd businessmen, something that seems to have gained them some degree of unpopularity. Homer's Odyssey, probably written down in the 7th or 8th century BC from even more ancient oral traditions, describes the Phoenicians as cunning and untrustworthy, in contrast to the supposedly noble Greeks.
Thither came Phoenicians, men famed for their ships, greedy knaves bringing countless trinkets in their black ship.
And it seems the Phoenicians had become adept at metalworking too. The following passage in Homer's Odyssey describes an ornate bowl brought by traders from the Phoenician city of Sidon.
Then the son of Peleus set forth other prizes, a mixing bowl of silver, richly wrought, in beauty far the goodliest in all the earth. Sidonians, well skilled in deft handiwork, had wrought it cunningly, and men of the Phoenicians brought it over the murky deep and landed it in harbor.
As a seafaring people, the Phoenicians had a clear preference for building their cities on narrow, easily defended peninsulas, and where possible on islands set just offshore. Their most influential city of Tyre was a perfect example, located on a small island just off the rocky coast. In the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Ezekiel gives us a sense of the trade that the people of Tyre drove with their surrounding neighbors.
Tarshish did business with you because of your great wealth of goods. They exchanged silver, iron, tin, and lead for your merchandise. Greece, Tubal, and Meshech did business with you. They traded human beings and articles of bronze for your wares. Men of Beth Togarmah exchanged chariot horses, cavalry horses, and mules. Aram exchanged turquoise, purple fabric, embroidered work, fine linen, coral, and rubies. Judah and Israel traded with you. They exchanged wheat from Minnith, honey, olive oil, and balm.
While the natural defences of their geography had kept cities like Tyre independent for much of their history, this wasn't to last forever.
Yo, what's up, Renee?
The first millennium BC.
How are you?
was
Hope
an
you're doing
age
well.
of
Welcome
fire
to the
and
stream.
an age of empires. And soon the Phoenicians
Welcome, Renee.
found
Hello,
themselves in a
hello.
world of increasingly violent and aggressive neighbors. Perhaps the most terrifying of these was the power of the Assyrian Empire. From its heartlands in what is today Iraq, the Assyrian war machine would periodically stretch its power right to the coast of the Mediterranean and threaten to engulf the Phoenicians.
1312312434234234343
One inscription from the Palestinian Assyrian king gives just one example of the typical fate of a city conquered by the Assyrians.
That city.
Oh, you're getting banned.
I piled up heaps of heads from his front. Bands of captive soldiers. I impaled on stakes on every side of the city. is palm trees and from the city of
The Phoenicians had every reason to be nervous. At the start of the 8th century BC, the Assyrian king Adad-nirari III conquered the territory of northern Syria, as he boasts in his royal palace inscription.
Conquering from the Saluna mountain of the rising sun, and from the banks of the Euphrates, the country of Fatih, Amura in its full extent, the land of Tyre, the land of Sidon, the land of Israel, the land of Edom, the land of Philistia. I made them submit to my feet, imposing upon them tribute.
The Assyrians were now breathing directly down the necks of the Phoenician cities of the coast. But as time went on, the Phoenicians were able to carve out a niche for themselves that ensured they were quite simply too useful for the Assyrians to destroy.
131231234234234234235.
The Mediterranean Sea had long been an insurmountable challenge to many of the region's great powers. The Assyrians referred to it as Ishmadaki,
Oh my
or Bitter
God.
River, which they believed to flow around the whole earth, while the Egyptians referred to it as Wad Square, or the Great Green. These empires were freshwater river cultures and navigated the waters of their rivers in flat-bottomed barges. For this reason, they had always remained wary of the rougher waters.
Oh,
of the
fuck
sea.
you, man. Why are you doing
Assyria
this?
relied heavily on many of the commodities brought into the region.
You're seriously gonna do this? Fuck you. Like, fuck you, asshole.
Purple dye for their ships, bronze and iron for their armies. And so Assyria offered the city
Like, you're such a
Tyre
fucking
and
piece of
Sidon
shit.
something of a deal. They would be allowed a degree of independence, so long as they ensured a constant flow of metals and other resources into Assyria, and so long as they acted as a kind of navy for hire, providing their ships and sailors to Assyria in times of war. The Phoenicians had little choice but to accept. But there was one problem. The Assyrian demands for metal were truly staggering, and if they were going to be met, it would
Like, why are you
require
an
a
asshole,
drastic
man?
expansion of the
Like,
Phoenician
fuck
trade
you.
network.
1312312434234234234234235.
At first, the Phoenicians set up simple trading posts anywhere they could find good supplies of metal. Archaeology shows they set up trading communities in Cyprus to take advantage of its rich stores of copper, and in Sardinia, the Mediterranean's second largest island, rich in copper, iron, silver and lead. At these sites, local people usually did all the actual
Like,
mining,
holy
while
fuck
the
me, man.
Phoenicians simply turned up
No fun allowed, eh?
and take them away by ship. From Cyprus and Sardinia, Phoenician sailors pushed on into the west of the Mediterranean and set up a small colony
It's
of
just so fucking retarded.
North Africa, and even reached southern Spain, where they found that the mines practically overflowed with silver, iron, and other metals.
Like, no fun
Archaeologists
allowed,
found
eh?
huge
Fucking
Phoenician
asshole.
furnaces in this region, designed for smelting metal ingots for transportation on an industrial scale, all to satisfy the demands of the fearsome Assyrian king. Before long, the Phoenicians were sailing out through the Straits of Gibraltar, then known as the Pillars of Hercules, and out into the Atlantic Ocean. They set up a colony at Lixus on the western coast of Morocco, and pushed further down the coast to settle what is now the Moroccan port town of Essaouira, more than 4,000 kilometers from their homeland. To finance these expeditions, the Phoenicians developed innovative monetary systems that in some ways represented a form of ancient capitalism. Phoenician society was dominated by powerful trading firms, usually run by a certain family, and they pioneered the use of interest-bearing loans for voyages, even developing maritime insurance policies, which paid out if your ships were destroyed in a storm or plundered by pirates. But perhaps the greatest of their innovations was something that we use every day.
5654 W65555555.
Up until that point, writing had been a cumbersome and difficult task. The cuneiform writing systems that had been developed by the Sumerians thousands of years before and the hieroglyphics of the Egyptians were both difficult to learn and relied on the services of a learned class of scribes who spent years of their lives learning them. But the Phoenician alphabet was a masterclass in simplicity. It had only 22 letters and could be used to spell out words phonetically, leaving out any vowels. And quite ingeniously, the shapes of the letters also gave a clue as to how they were pronounced. Their letter B, for instance, was named Bet, which was the Phoenician word for house, and its symbol was drawn with a pointed roof. This simplicity drastically reduced the amount of time it took to learn, and meant that common traders and merchants may have had some ability to read and write, and to keep records, essential for the complex business of buying and selling across the sea. The Phoenician alphabet was such a good idea that it was adopted almost wholesale by the Greeks, as the Greek historian Herodotus recounts.
These Phoenicians who came with Cadmus brought with them to Greece, among many other kinds of learning, the alphabet. As time went on, the sound and form of the letters were changed, and after being taught the letters by the Phoenicians, the Greeks who were settled around them used them with a few changes of form.
With the addition of some letters for vowels, what resulted was the Greek alphabet, which means that the Phoenician writing system is the foundation of all Western alphabets used today. The earliest piece of Phoenician writing was found on an inscribed tablet known as the Nora Stone, unearthed in Sardinia, apparently commemorating a Phoenician captain who may have died in conflict with the local people.
He fought with the Sardinians at Tarshish, and he drove them out. Among the Sardinians, he is now at peace, and his army is at peace. Milkaton, son of Shubna, general of King Pumei.
But for the most part, the Phoenicians seem to have interacted with the people they met relatively peacefully, and most of all, profitably. Before long, the cities of Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos found themselves at the far east of a sprawling trade network. Keeping such a loose and disparate collection of colonies together was no easy task, but it seems that here the Phoenician religion played a key role. The people of Tyre worshipped a heroic god known as Melkart, a warrior hero who the Greeks would later associate with Hercules. Temples to Melkart were set up at multiple Phoenician trading posts, and most had an olive tree, a symbol of the city of Tyre, growing in their central courtyard. The grandest of these temples was built at the furthest Phoenician colony from Tyre, then known as Gyges, what is now the Spanish city of Cadiz. This colony sat on the Atlantic coast, just outside the Straits of Gibraltar, but it made up for its extreme distance from Tyre with its immense opulence. At the center of the temple stood an olive tree, with its branches and leaves wrought out of solid gold, holding emerald fruits in its branches.
I'm gonna quit and restart
Women
stream.
were
Be
forbidden
right back.
entry to the temple, as were pigs,